All right, YouTube, this Detroit's HPTV coming at you with another video on Thursday. Well, it's breaking news. Donald Trump has just been found guilty on all 34 counts. And you know the Democrats are going to be celebrating as if this was a victory for the country. But in all actuality, it's a sad state of affairs because if they can actually find Donald Trump guilty in a sham trial like this, it can happen to anybody. Think about this. Their star witness, Mark Cohen, admitted to perjury and lying on the stand several times. He admitted to actually stealing $30,000 from Trump. And he was the witness. And logically, how can you believe beyond a reasonable doubt anything that he says after he's already lied several times and admitted to stealing from Trump, admitting to being Trump's enemy? It's strange that the Democrats would count this as a victory in a lawfare, because what does it really do to the Constitution and people who rely on the judicial system for fairness? You know, as a Black American, I have witnessed and seen a lot of travesties of injustice, a lot. And we have always known that there was very little integrity in the court system. But to see this trial, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you cannot trust this judicial system. Also today, I seen where the Democrats were mad at Supreme Court Justice Alito, and they intend to try to change the very structure of the Supreme Court. If these things don't show you that the Democratic Party are the biggest threat to the democracy of this country and to the fairness of the court system in the American way, nothing else will. What we seeing today is very pivotal. This is the first U.S. president ever to be convicted of a crime, of a felony. Now, you may say, well, he's not the president. If you know anything about the laws of this country, once you have been a president, you are always to be referred to as the president. But let me get off into the clip in the video. This for fair use in the 1976 Copyright Act for commentary educational purposes. This is really something dangerous, because what jury would find you guilty under the word of a perjurer and a thief beyond a reasonable doubt? Let's check out the video.
2016 Republican presidential election campaign. The charge of felony arises from in the 2016 Republican presidential election campaign. The charge of felony arises from reimbursements paid to then Trump lawyer Michael Cohen after he made a $130,000 hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels to silence her claims that the two had sex in 2006. You can see there's a little bit of movement in and out of the courtroom. I don't know if they're going to go on break before the verdict is reached, but we did see Trump walk back in through these doors into the courtroom. Trump is accused of misrepresenting Cohen's reimbursement as legal expenses to hide that they were tied to a hush money payment. Trump has pleaded not guilty and contends the Cohen payments were for legitimate legal services. You just seen Alina Habba there, a representative for Trump, walk back inside the courtroom. He also has denied the former president he alleged extramarital sexual encounter with Daniels, and to convict, the jury will have to find unanimously that he created a fraudulent entry in his company's record or caused someone else to do so, and that he did so with the intent of committing or concealing yet another crime. There are several outcomes that the jury could come to as the verdict has been reached just at the last hour here of the day on day number 2. The New York case is widely seen as seeming the least consequential of the 4 criminal prosecutions Trump faces, but it's meant that the Republican presidential candidate spent more time in court than campaigning. He said that on his way back into the courtroom today, saying, "I want to campaign," alluding to the fact that he has not been out on the campaign trail as much as he's wanted to, less than 5 months ahead of this November election. All right, so we're still awaiting this verdict as it's just coming down. We're going to get everything lined up, but you can just see one monitoring here outside of this courtroom, inside of this courthouse there. The outcomes possibly of this are a guilty verdict, an acquittal, or a hung jury. A guilty verdict would result if the jury finds guilty on all 34 counts. He would be eligible for a prison sentence. Of course, opinion polls show a guilty verdict could potentially pose political danger for Trump in an election year that will potentially be decided by just tens of thousands of votes. Not guilty verdict would be reached if the jury finds not guilty on all 34 counts. The prosecution would be unable to try him. Consultants from across the political spectrum agree that one thing, an acquittal would be likely a huge win for Trump, especially because he's claimed the trial is a sham for political prosecution. A hung jury, though, if the 12 jurors hearing Trump's case can't agree on a unanimous verdict, either way, it can be one jury or multiple juries not deciding this. So we're going to continue. We're just waiting to see what comes of this verdict being reached, but we're continuing to follow this wall to wall here on Live Now from Fox.
I'm going to speed it up because
are in our Constitution. And Nima and Andy, I think it's important to note, no pun intended, there were no notes to the jury, or to the judge rather, today. It was essentially somewhat smooth sailing. Yes, they took a few breaks. They took a break for lunch, and then they got back into the deliberations. We saw the prosecution come back into the room. We saw Trump and his defense team come back into the room. We saw the media come back into the room. And Nima, how rare is that? We were reporting before the 4:30 Eastern mark that the judge had dismissed, or was going to dismiss, the jury at that time that was already pre-selected for today to end the deliberations. And then everyone got back in the room. Producers in the room were questioning, what is this all about? And then we got the news that the jury was going to go home, and the judge had said that. Minutes later, Nima, we get the news the jury has reached a verdict here. How rare, how uncustomary is something like that? I think that threw a lot of people, because we had literally just reported 10 minutes before the jury was going home for the day.
It is not common, but it happens. That pressure of returning for another day is real, and it can encourage jurors to change their mind. I think we had one holdout, just speculation. We don't know what's happening in that deliberation room, and it'll be up to the jurors to decide whether they want to talk or to rename, to keep anonymous and retain their anonymity. But if someone does discuss and divulge those conversations back there, I believe that there was one juror that was holding out, and the pressure of coming back tomorrow to continue deliberating caused him or her to change their mind. And ultimately, they relented, and we were able to get this verdict.
Yeah.
I was going to say continue on, Crab, because I asked Nima about the fact that he's kind of predicting a guilty verdict with no prison sentence, no jail time for him as well. And we mentioned just the unprecedented nature of this. How kind of careful is the judge being about this? Because he does not want to see, no matter the verdict, outcome guilty or innocence there. He doesn't want to see kind of riots in the streets. How careful is the judge kind of monitoring maybe what's going on in the courtroom, respecting what the jury has to say, but also aware of the outside circumstances?
You know, I mean, to that point, Andy, though, we know, and we're getting reporting in from our producers in the room, that Judge Merchan has indicated to the gallery not to have any outbursts when the verdict is read. And the verdict will be read sometime between 30 and 60 minutes after we just learned that it has been reached. So I think that's really interesting. Judge Juan Merchan is very keenly aware that he does not want any emotional outbursts in the courtroom from anyone in the gallery, from the prosecution team or from the Trump defense team, or even from the press as well. Here, I want to just throw this up here. This is kind of a mock jury verdict form. According to our producers in the room, they're not making the jury verdict form public, but this is what it would look like. And it has all 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Two options: either guilty or not guilty. And correct me if I'm wrong, Nima, but that's what we are waiting for the jury to fill out. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely right. There's 34 counts. The jurors have to be unanimous as to each count. And when they come in, the defense and the prosecution, depending on who loses, will ask for the jurors to be polled. And they will have to go on record and verbally say that this is their verdict as to each count. So it will take some time even after the verdicts are read. We got to go through all those 34 counts. So really exciting stuff. And going back to what you said, Andrew, really Judge Juan Merchan, he is being judged, no pun intended, on how he handles his courtroom. Does it become a circus? Is he able to maintain decorum? That's why he took issue with Trump's violations of the gag order, some of the expletives that he said under his breath. And one of the defense's witnesses, Bob Costello, was making snide remarks and comments. So we're nearing the end of the process, but the judge will want to make sure that there aren't any outbursts by members of the public, because look, this verdict, regardless of what it is going to result in significant political backlash one way or the other. And look, let's talk about the political reality here. This case was rejected by the feds. It was rejected by Cyrus Vance Jr., Alvin Bragg's predecessor as the Manhattan DA. And I have to think one of the reasons it was is they didn't want to deal with the political fallout. And just like Judge Merchan did not want to imprison Trump because it would result in civil unrest and mass protests, I think he wants to get to the end of this process and keep it as little politicized as possible.
Yeah, and that's going to be a very, very difficult kind of bargain to keep, because he is the Republican presumptive nominee, and we can get into all the political implications of whatever the verdict might be a little bit later on.
I'm going to stop it for a minute. They want now to say that they worried about civil unrest, when in all actuality, they use lawfare against a political opponent and his supporters in a case that was rejected by the federal government and Alvin Bragg's predecessor. It's going to be very crazy to see The View, Joy Reid, and all of Trump's enemies, how they're going to be so celebratory in the face of all of his supporters. This has the potential to be the most divisive situation that this country has seen in a couple hundred years. Think about it.
Former president today mouthed to the cameras as he went back into court. He said, "I want to campaign." We caught that on video here. So that has been one of these political considerations at play throughout the duration of this. How was the trial going to interfere with his campaign schedule? He had to be there every day. The trial was on almost every day of the week except Wednesdays, and they picked back up on Monday as well here. And you're talking about jury fatigue, Nima, because so many of the legal analysts that we were speaking to, even you, Nima, yesterday told me that this could go into next week. A lot of legal analysts that we had spoken to last night were predicting a hung jury. They were predicting that not all jurors were going to be in agreement on all counts here. And that is why the deliberations were taking so long. And so I think it is safe to say we were expecting this to either go, not only into tomorrow, but into next week. And that is why it's been so surprising to so many of us who have followed this so closely that, we did get a verdict reached this afternoon here. And so there were a lot of murmurings and rumblings on whether or not the jury wanted to stay later after the 4:30 p.m. Eastern deadline, but now that is not the case. So I think it's a good thing for viewers if we can kind of tease out some of the scenarios. And Nima, you did that with Andy Mack as well. But let's go over them yet again. Let's reiterate what happens to Donald Trump. One, if he is acquitted, and two, if he is found guilty. Because I think if he is found guilty, there are going to be some of these pre-sentencing limitations and conditions on him. What would those be? I mean, he is running for president.
This is all the preliminary information that they were saying, because this is actually breaking news. But Donald Trump has already been found guilty. The jury did come out and find him guilty on all 34 counts. And with that being said, how far are they willing to go with this? Are they willing to send Donald Trump to prison with his Secret Service protection? I mean, at this point, you got to feel like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. You're not in Kansas anymore, And the way Trump was demonized, I can only imagine how his enemies are going to celebrate and be overly smug in the face of this verdict, as if this just has not just divided the entire country. If they send Donald Trump to prison, what happens to what they call a democracy? Is it back to business as usual for the Democratic Party? I don't know.
You indicated this. He could be the president of the United States again come January.
A chance to save it. So you can hear just some of the language from different people, including the son there of the former president, guilty on all counts. Let's continue here on Live Now from Fox. I'm going to bring Andrew Kraft into the conversation because I know he has a lot on his mind. Kraft, any questions right now top of mind for Nima as we learn all this news? We hear the reaction from all aisles of the spectrum.
So, I just want to reiterate, too, what the charges were, these 34 counts. Falsifying business records in the first degree. And Nima has done a great job of explaining that these are Class E felonies. But, Nima, you were mentioning possible mistakes by the defense. In hindsight, the defense not calling more witnesses, including their own client, was that seen, or is that going to be seen as overconfidence on their part? This was a smart jury. You and I have talked about this. Two lawyers on that jury, this jury based in New York here. What are some of the recriminations? What are some of the lessons learned if you're Todd Blanche and his defense team, or was the deck stacked against you from the get-go?
I don't know if this was necessarily a winnable case, but the defense did itself no favors. You cannot lose credibility with the jurors. You cannot overpromise and underdeliver. If you say a witness is going to testify, you better put that witness on the stand. I'm sure the jurors remember that, because I was thinking that this case was going to be an accountant that was going to be a fall guy or girl, and that was going to explain those records. That didn't happen. The defense made this case solely about Michael Cohen. And we've talked about how terrible of a witness is, how unlikable he is, how not credible he is.
And I can't get past that. That how can you find a person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt when the witness against him is one of the most not credible people to ever grace a courtroom? This is problematic, to say the least. Things just took a turn for the worse, whether people believe it or not. And those who wanted to see this result, I don't think they're going to be as happy as they thought they would because of this. I just got that feeling.
But the prosecution did a good job of corroborating that testimony with folks like David Pecker, who the jurors believe, that recording related to Karen McDougal, Weisselberg's notes. They brought out all those bad facts about Cohen in their case in chief on direct, the state did, and really took the wind out of the defense's sails. So they needed to put on more witnesses, they needed to put on better witnesses, and Donald Trump should have testified. Huge mistake by him not doing so.
We are getting so many of these incredible scenes from around the courthouse. So many Trump opponents, so many Trump supporters are coming out there in Lower Manhattan to just watch the spectacle. I just want to take the viewers back to last March. This was the first indictment secured against former President Trump out of the 4 that he faces right now. We have a resolution on the first one. Last March, he came to New York City. He was arraigned in a courtroom. The district attorney who brought the case, Alvin Bragg, was there in the courtroom. He was there in the courtroom also yesterday. I'm not entirely sure if we're going to hear from Alvin Bragg and his team, possibly a little bit later on. We don't know that just yet, but I would expect we're going to hear from the prosecution about their reaction here. And this was the political dynamics at play, Nima and Andy. And you remember this, and the viewers know this. There was a parent.
Over here, I just got a post that Donald Trump just posted online. This is what Donald Trump has just posted on Truth Social. This was a disgrace, a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who is corrupt. We will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Donald Trump via Social Truth. Donald Trump speaking already.
At play. Each time Donald Trump was indicted on criminal charges, felonies, and misdemeanors, his support in the polls would rise. And so many of his even supporters and detractors alike could not, get a sense of why this was happening. And now Donald Trump is a convicted felon going into the summer, going into the convention there in Milwaukee in August. And so I just have to ask, what limitations or inhibitions on Donald Trump the person will he have now that he is a convicted felon when it comes to, will he be able to even vote for himself in the state of Florida? Are there going to be prohibitions on his person now that he is a convicted felon? You said, Nima, he's not going to be remanded into custody, but he is going to go throughout the entire campaign season now with that moniker. And we might see, as we have seen, his support only grow after this, but it could have the adverse effect. If you're a convicted felon, and even you have the Trump effect where your support has grown with these indictments, this is new territory because now it is official, and we'll just have to wait and see how his support either grows or degrades.
All right, let me cut you off real quick because we see the former president now walking up to the cameras. Let's just listen into what he has to say after being found guilty on all of these charges there in New York City.
This was a disgrace.
This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win. Because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now. From prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
You're just listening in there to the former president as he was.
I'm going to end there and let Donald Trump have the last word. It's going to be some very interesting times because I can just see the witches of the View and Joyless Reed and all the other deranged Trump haters, Charlemagne the God, and all the people who have been hoping and praying that he will be found guilty. I'm just wondering, is this really what they wanted? How do they see this actually playing out long term? Signing to you out of Detroit. Peace. Keep your head on the swivel. Salute to all patriots. Like, share, and subscribe.